we should get started. I'm Liz. I work on Course Report, which is a resource for students who are choosing a coding bootcamp. We are here today to talk about arguably the most important, stressful but important and rewarding time at a boot camp, and a topic that we get a ton of questions about, which is the job search. So welcome.
And I'm Jess. I'm the content manager here at Course Report, and we're so happy to welcome all of you and our panelists today for this live Q&A. These panelists are all helping students launch their tech careers.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump right in and introduce everyone. Jess, we've got 4 stellar panelists today. All have a lot of experience in career services. Molly Kine, who is the Vice President of Learning and Community at Flatiron School. Thanks for being here, Molly. And Vinny Sanfilippo, who is the Senior Director of Career Development at Tech Elevator. Thanks for being here, Vinny.
We also have Ashley Ramos, who's the Senior Manager of Career Services at Springboard, and Lee Berry, who is the Senior Manager of Outcomes at General Assembly. Welcome to Ashley and Lee.
Absolutely. Okay, so as you can see, we've got some experts on the panel who all kind of have their finger on the pulse of the tech job market right now. So I'm really excited to hear their answers to all the questions that you asked when you RSVP'd, which was a lot.
Yeah, and if you asked a question when you registered, we'll pass those on to our panel, and we'll continue to take your questions live. So be sure to use that Q&A feature on YouTube Live throughout this live panel.
Absolutely. Okay, and so speaking of that that Q&A feature, just to get everyone thinking, a couple of questions that Jess and I thought would be interesting. If you want to tell us in the chat, introduce yourself, tell us maybe where you are in your tech job search. Are you enrolled in a boot camp? Are you thinking about enrolling in a boot camp? Are you thinking more about like the job that you want to get? Tell us where you are today.
We'd love to know on a scale of 1 to 10 how confident you're feeling about landing your first tech job within 6 months.
And then also think about and maybe share what your dream job would be as you think about your future. Kind of a fun thing to think about. But I want to hop in and just start talking about what things are looking like today. So Vinny, I'd love for you to take this one. High level, what are we seeing in today's job market? How is 2024 maybe different for bootcamp grads than say 2014, 2020? What are we looking at today?
Right. So it's a big question to start us off with, but I'm really excited to talk about it. So 2014, boot camps really entered on the scene. It's important to understand the context that we've only been around for maybe 10, 13 years, that boot camps were even a thing that existed. So a job seeker in 2014 would experience what's a boot camp? What's that kind of like, how do I get myself in front of hiring partners and understand that I have the same kind of experience or maybe even better than a traditional college grad might have? Fast forward to 2020, everything went remote and an explosion of activity happened for boot camps, especially because people needed software engineers fast. Things like Zoom and collaborative workspaces like Slack really took off in ways that they haven't done before because people weren't going into the office anymore. They were working online. To where we are now, there was a fast batch of hiring. Federal interest rates went up. Hiring costs became more strenuous for companies than it has been before. And so now we're in a position where the market's cooled and it's not done. Software engineers aren't going anywhere. People still have needs for them, right? But it's not as white hot as it has been in several different times in that decade that we've seen. So what we've seen today, what's a little different is that job seekers have to be very passionate about the things that they do. They have to be very intentional about the places that they're applying to. We're seeing this kind of conversation around like, employers are hiring more slowly and methodically than ever because of those borrowing costs being greater than they have been in the past. And for anybody who's in their job search and kind of freaking out right now, I just want to say it's going to be okay. We're in an election year, and this happens every 4 years that we're in an election year here in the United States, that hiring kind of goes, companies that want to see what's going to happen next before they make any big decisions. We're going to add AI as a bucket topic on top of that gives us a really confusing, volatile job market that we're in right now.
Well, I think that's yeah, Jess, I think you know where we're going next. Lee, maybe you want to take that. So how do you think AI is kind of impacting the tech job market right now? And do you think that there's a difference between kind of hype around AI and how AI is actually impacting job listings, volume, demand for jobs? I know it's a big question.
It is, but it's a really timely one and a really important one. I think the narrative around AI has been so jagged in terms of like, this is so great, but also this is so dangerous. This is so unknown, but this is creating some certainty. And there's so much, I would say, grassroots conversation happening about what this means for AI. The founders of ChatGPT don't even understand what the potential is for AI. I mean, there's just from every level down, there's a lot of questions, I think, more than answers related to AI at the moment. However, when you look at what the job market is and you look at like the impact of AI, I think there's a lot of more potential than there is consequence. And so, in the wider landscape, you might be looking at, well, there's this idea that my job will be taken away by AI, or, there's this overestimation of what AI can currently do. I think one of the most important things is to really embrace the idea of AI and really the potential of what it can do to help you, rather than what it means for just a specific role. There's a lot of debunked myths out there around, hey, is AI going to take over this job or take over that one? I like to think of AI, as one of those intern tools, right? It is an intern for you, but it is not who you are and your potential as as a tech professional. There's so much more that we as humans do that cannot be done or replicated by AI. So it adds a ton of value in terms of the tools that you'll use and you'll need to learn how to use. Being a tech professional in any discipline that you choose to go into, it will be incorporated into your daily role, right? And it also be an important part of your job search. So in the conversation today, and we can definitely dive into this more, but there's just so much value into adding AI to it. So whether that's an incredible tool for researching, understanding the tech landscape for you as a career transitioner, you also have a really great tool for taking out some of the erroneous or repetitive tasks that in the past we've had to, do individually one after another as a job seeker. So you can automate, you can simplify your process, and you really focus your time and energy, on the things that are the most important for you to be doing. And so I think thinking creatively on how to use it, you can open up ChatGPT right now and get started on your job search. And that's what I love so much about it. What types of tech companies would my background in this or that suit, or be a good fit for? I mean, it's so great to start getting ideas and generating potential and possibilities for you as a job seeker.
That's a great point. And yes, we will talk a little bit later about how to kind of put those tools and specific tools to work for you. So thanks, Lee.
Definitely. Let's talk a little bit about where these jobs are in 2024. So like at your school, everyone, where are alumni finding jobs? Is there like a specific industry or a job title or even a job level that your alumni are landing? Molly, let's start this off with you. What are you seeing there at Flatiron School?
Yeah, another great question. So ever since the pandemic, we've been tracking really closely where our students are landing in terms of remote, in-person, or hybrid roles. For a long time, it's sort of landed in about a third, a third, and a third. We continue to see more and more companies hiring in their offices. They want people back in person. They want people local. So that's definitely a trend that we're following closely. Also, in times of uncertainty, people turn to data. We're seeing more data roles and more cybersecurity roles relative to, some of those traditional junior level software engineering roles that Vinny mentioned at the top of the meeting. So those are two trends that we're paying attention to, and I'm interested to hear and see and follow along.
Yeah, and at Springboard, Ashley, where are alumni landing?
Yeah, I would say similar to Molly's answer. We're seeing the same trends, right? I'll touch on this a little bit more later, but really thinking about what are considered stable industries when you think about a downturn market, a recession, whatever you want to call right now, an election year. So really thinking about those things like healthcare, industries like education, government, things like that. So, instead of getting into really, thinking about jobs everywhere, where do you hone in during this time looking for those things? And so we've seen lots and lots of employment offers come through from those areas that are considered those stable industries.
Healthcare, education, government, that is super helpful. If we're not thinking about like big tech as being the strongest hire right now, it's nice to think about some other industries. And Vinny, how about at Tech Elevator? Where are you seeing folks land right now?
I want to echo what Molly said of there has been a huge shift in return to in-person learning, or in rather in-person, like you need to be in the office. It's really great for a junior to be in the office anyway. So this is what we've been counseling students for a long time. It's like you get to ask your engineering manager who's right there, hey, what do you think about this code? You get to have these moments where you get to talk to people. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. The other thing that we're seeing a lot of is a really large spike in both manufacturing and government hiring for our typical like junior software engineering positions, but manufacturing has seen a lot of investment from like especially around green tech and bringing like things like Intel here. We have a big hub in Columbus, Ohio. Intel's building a big plant here, so that's something that we're seeing a lot of, as well as a lot of government jobs are being posted around all of these initiatives that are going in for software developers.
And Lee, how about it? How about at General Assembly? Anything that you're noticing? Any trends there?
You know, I'm gonna echo a lot of what has been said. I'll get a little bit more granular. So here's who's hired from us in the last 30 days. So tech and software are still the #1 for us. I will give like a note of what I'm seeing amongst the companies that are hiring, which is there's more of like a niche on those software companies. There's tons of names I've never heard of before. We still do have predominantly consulting and professional services. That has always been a very steady one. So pretty large size consulting companies, as well as medium size. Healthcare, of course, education, financial services, which I know there's a question around and we'll talk about a little bit later, but fintech as a whole has just grown exponentially. I would say an interest from folks who are attending the program, and then employer partners and things like that. Retail, consumer goods, government, public sector. And, I believe that was, Vinny, what you were talking about. Utilities and infrastructure is a really big one for us as well. And again, to echo Ashley's point, slow and steady, like just very basic, important things to focus on when there is a downturn in the market. These places are always looking for talent and they need it to keep their operations going. So I love that that was already mentioned.
Absolutely. I mean, we got a couple of questions when folks RSVP'd. Chris had asked for tips about getting into an ed tech company position. Louis Claude asked about finance. Kevin asked about the state of US government, contracting jobs. It sounds like those are 3 industries that you are seeing alumni go into today. So it sounds like those are some of the stronger industries right now. Maybe education, government, higher up there. All right, fantastic. Well, okay, so kind of acknowledging that the job market is maybe a bit volatile now, but there are still great jobs out there, and y'all have just pointed out many industries that that folks should look at. Let's focus on some actionable tips for bootcamp grads. So Sophia asked when she RSVP'd for a list of actions and suggestions for job seekers. So I'm gonna actually keep that list as we go, and we'll share it after we wrap up. But let's get into some of these questions that folks asked when they RSVP'd. Okay, so Ashley, what should someone focus on after graduation? You just did the full boot camp. What do you do the day after, and what should your plan kind of be? Jerome had asked, is it AI skills? Is that like the #1 thing I should focus on? Is that the game changer? What do you think?
Yeah, great question. One of my favorite things to tackle, and one of the things that I think I'm constantly reminding job seekers at Springboard. After you complete any sort of program where you've gained new skills, you have to understand that the field is ever changing, right? This is technology we're talking about. It's changing all the time. So hopefully you identified early on that when you decided that a job in the technology space was for you, that you have a love of learning, because it's never going to end in this space. So keeping that in consideration, continuous project work and work experience are going to be fruitful in your success to getting more to getting to that job more quickly, right? So I recommend places like The Forage, Omdina, Develop for Good, etc. There are tons of spaces out there by which you can be getting additional project work to keep your skills sharp while also gaining more experience on your resume if you're truly making a career pivot. I think the other piece is don't be scared of identifying ulterior passive income or employment, right? That includes identifying W-2 contract opportunities through staffing and employment agencies, building your own business to accept 1099 contract work, and apprenticeship programs. And to touch briefly on the AI piece, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a game changer. It's just the reality of the future. Just as any modern tech phenomenon kind of comes into play, you have to choose to incorporate it early so that way you're already on track to stay up to date. It's about adapting to changes in technology that either keeps you moving forward or holding you back.
I think that's really good advice. And thanks for giving those specific sites, The Forage, Develop for Good. That's awesome.
We had Wes ask this question: am I more likely to find a job through a placement site or through a personal / networking connection? So let's talk a little bit about networking. Lee, on your side, are you seeing any networking trends this year?
You know, as much as I've seen things pop up that are new and novel, I also see a lot of the most classic things working as well. So I'm going to touch on more generally what has worked in the past and what things I'm seeing that have changed. So in previous years, you know, and I've been at General Assembly now for 5 years. So when I first began, right, there was a very specific, you know, way in which you could go through the process and motions of, you know, updating your resume, making sure you hit those keywords and hit a certain match score, right? And you submit, and then you would just message someone, and that would be your networking strategy. Nowadays, recruiters, hiring managers, they are inundated with this type of outreach, right? So what used to be a very effective personalized approach has become something that can feel daunting to do because you're not necessarily going to get a response. So there is a need for not only having a very personalized approach with your, resume and application, but also building up a relationship with someone before you even apply for something, which I think is, one, requires a more tailored, like, quality approach, rather than focusing on everything that you want to do, focusing more specifically on where your interests are, where your background is, and what you're skill building around, much to what, Ashley and Vinny and Molly all have been talking about. But you have to really focus in and then build your network around that. So one thing I spend a lot more time doing in session is that networking strategy. So when we talk trends, we talk proactive outreach. We also have the blessing of in-person networking now being something that is more plentiful, right? So the ability to take advantage of in-person events, conferences, which are just abundant this fall. They've already set a calendar for 2025. We've all been noodling all over all the things that are coming out, to kind of identify what to recommend for folks. But, for all of you out there, you can take a look and see what are some of those big high-level industries that are promoting the types of opportunities that you're interested in, the companies that are involved, and you can go meet those folks in person. During the pandemic, it was so scarce and everything turned online, and that personalized approach just became so challenging for so long. And if you are willing to do the work to push yourself through that, because I know for many career changers, imposter syndrome is just rampant, right, when you're making a career change. But really working, whether it's with your coach, counselor, whoever it is, right, in the program, with your loved ones, really putting yourself out there and getting to meet and connect with new people, having a mentor plus a champion, someone who can really shepherd your application or say, yes, this person's really great, having those skills and experience to be able to share. One wonderful thing about the program, is that you do go in with other people, which is a wonderful experience. You build a camaraderie. You also build networking connections with others who have varying levels of experience as well. And so I've also had it where folks will come back and say, great, I would love to, hire other folks in the program, or, come back and hire people from their specific cohort, which is also wonderful. So networking happens everywhere, but definitely take advantage of all the in-person networking opportunities that are now much more readily available.
Yeah, thanks so much for those reminders, especially about those in-person opportunities that are definitely more plentiful this year. And Molly, you've said before that it's important to meet 100 people through networking. I'd love for you to kind of walk us through that and let us know why is that
And
Yeah.
how?
and how. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the gaps that I regularly see with bootcamp grads is that while you may have a really good grasp on the technical components, and to Ashley's point, you are naturally a lifelong learner and you're ready, right? You're ready to hit the job market, is the idea of the context around how your skills add value at different companies, among different teams, even different size companies. How do you speak about your work in a way that a hiring manager can relate to? Or how do you connect your background to the work that you're doing today? That takes practice to do it well. And so, to Leah's point, right, the networking strategy may look different for everyone. We want to lean into our strengths around how it is that you can be authentic for yourself and also put yourself out there. And I think the reason I like this Meet 100 People challenge so much is because it provides structure. And in this ambiguous, ups and downs of a job search, or this, I need to network, I know I need to network, having a list that you can make that says, here are people that I already know. Here are second degree connections that I would like to know. And challenging yourself, maybe 100 isn't your number, but maybe it's 20 or maybe it's 15. And actually checking off and feeling that feeling of saying, I am making forward progress towards my goal helps with momentum in a job search. But through all of the conversations that you're having as part of this challenge, you're actually gaining a really important context around how does this person, what does their day look like? How is their product or their technology team set up? How do they work with other stakeholders? How do they divide and conquer? What does their interactions with their manager look like? Hearing different people talk about their day-to-day can help connect the dots from what you've learned and worked on in the classroom or built for yourself to how do I speak about this work in the context of an interview or in a new role? And it will help you on your networking efforts. It'll give you some structure to work off of. People love to support a project. If you can kind of tell your friends, hey, I set a goal to meet 100 people by the end of the year. Is there anyone that you know that would talk to me for 15 minutes? Maybe anyone who loves their job or anyone who works in the sphere of the tech world. People can support that because it's a clear ask. They can get on board. And everyone we've challenged to do this, some people don't like the idea of 100, it's too many, but the structure tends to resonate with people. And I think adding that layer of context for different businesses, different industries will only improve how you show up in an interview and your opportunity to get interviews in the first place because the people that you meet along the way.
Those are great tips. Okay, so Martin had asked when he RSVP'd, is remote hiring still a trend for junior engineers? Chelsea asked the same thing or a similar thing, what are the best resources for finding a remote job? Molly, earlier you said that you're seeing more in person. Vinny, you added that is almost a good trend for junior developers. It's nice to be in person with your new team as a new developer. But for someone who is looking for that remote job, Ashley, maybe you can take this one. Are there still great resources for finding remote jobs? Is this still somewhat of a trend? Can someone expect to get a remote job as a junior engineer?
I'm gonna lean on what the other wonderful panelists have kind of already said. I think if we're talking about breaking into this field, if that is your true goal, then you would want to follow the path that is going to get you there the fastest. And I think we all agree on this panel that right now, based on what we're seeing, that the fastest path is going to be with those in person or hybrid, right? Hybrid is still giving you a little bit of both worlds, but your willingness to kind of let go of that dream remote job will help you propel faster. it doesn't mean that there aren't remote opportunities out there. We're advocating for this approach because we know that the market is already competitive. And if you add on that there are folks out there who probably have a lot more experience who are also job searching, they may be seen as a higher quality candidate just simply on they maybe have already worked in a remote, area. They're not as new, right? There are certain aspects of that are true for them that make them a higher quality candidate for a remote job. If remote is something that you are after, it's totally fine. I think that you also have to adjust your expectations on your timeline to getting that job. So it is possible. And for those of you that maybe are on here who are like, well, I am somebody that has lots of experience, I am going to leverage that, then maybe looking for a remote job is still within your cards. Are you choosing to continue to leverage your background and experience from an industry you were previously in as you move to a tech specific job? Then yeah, maybe that's part of your strategy and it will work for you. But I think we are all here kind of looking at a lens of, we are working with folks looking for jobs who, maybe are already unemployed, maybe are looking to increase their financial situation. And usually those things want to happen on a really fast timeline. And so we're really focused on what's going to get you there fastest.
Yeah, that's such a good point about your timeline for this journey. Earlier, Lee pointed out that hiring managers are inundated right now. When people are RSVPing, Randall asked, like, what's the best way to get your resume read by a hiring manager rather than just kind of filtered by the AI or whatever is that first gate there. And Anastasia asked how she can make the best resume. So Vinny, do you want to tackle this set of questions here?
Sure. So the strategy for any resume is to beat the applicant tracking system. That's the first goal in any resume is how do I make sure that when I go to apply, I'm not automatically filtered out. If you are getting rejected in the first 5 to 10 minutes from this really bland, generic email, it's likely you got rejected by the applicant tracking system and no one's even seen your resume. So when you go to make a resume, you want it to be clean, crisp, concise is usually what I tell students. You don't need it to be flashy. You don't need to have bells and whistles. Keep your headshot off there. That's not the place for it. Make sure that your skills are clear front and center. Make sure your work experience is on there. Keep it short, usually within a page if you're seeking a junior role. Those are like the bare minimums to make sure that your resume beats the applicant tracking system and looks like it's a junior software engineer's resume. The next part is that we have to dip into other strategies in order to get it to the top of the stack. Unless you have you can set up a LinkedIn job alert. If you didn't know how to do that, it's very easy to do that. When someone posts a new role, you get pinged, hey, these new roles got posted in your area based on your criteria that you've put in here. That way you can ensure you're one of the first to apply on there. Don't apply on LinkedIn directly if you can apply on the company site. The LinkedIn portal goes to LinkedIn Recruiter, which is a separate pool of resumes, and they will always look at the business's website first in their own applicant tracking system. That's also 2 different ATSs that you have to beat if you apply from LinkedIn or Indeed. You have to go through theirs, and then it might filter through their ATS, which usually isn't a great experience for one ATS to talk to another ATS, and it's kind of a mess. So don't do that. If you can't apply directly on the site, do that. The next thing I like to tell folks too is now we got to do whatever we got to do. I don't want to say cheat, but we got to do whatever we got to do in order to get our resume to the top of the stack. So if I'm applying a job at Springboard and I send my resume in, I'm not just going to let that be it. I'm going to find out, okay, Ashley's the hiring manager for this role. I'm going to reach out to her on LinkedIn. She's posting about all this networking event in my area that Springboard's hosting. I'm going to go there and meet her. Why not? The worst thing she can say is thanks for your time. It was great to meet you. You're not the person for this role, but it's great to meet you. That's the worst thing you can say. She can say she might know somebody else that's in there in the universe, but the networking piece of reaching out to somebody and just connecting with them. It's not hey, I applied to your role. It's, hey, Ashley, I'm really interested in the work that you're doing at Springboard. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you've been working on? It seems really exciting. Asking them a few questions and treating them like a human being suddenly is that Vinny kid was pretty cool. Let's see what he said he applied. Huh. let's go ahead and give them a try because I have positive memories associated with this person being a culture fit here. That's how you can get your resume to the top of the stack. Don't sit there and spend a ton of time re-editing your resume for every single job that you do out there. It is helpful if you're applying to different job roles to customize your resume a little bit to highlight different experiences. Say you're applying for a QA role here and a junior developer role here. You might want to highlight different skills that are on your resume, but this shouldn't take you hours upon hours fixing your resume. If you're not getting automatically rejected, the resume is not the problem. It's probably either your volume or you're not networking with enough people and getting yourself out there.
Vinny, as a follow-up question, first, that's incredible advice and very like real world advice. Appreciate that. As a follow-up question, one of the reasons that an applicant can get rejected can certainly be around education background. And I know that 4-year degree requirement has been lifted in certain industries, and that's amazing. But Jennifer had asked, what is the best way to find roles that don't require a 4-year degree? And what are y'all seeing right now? Are people getting rejected by that initial applicant tracking system because of that anymore? Or is this just a problem that we're still kind of in the thick of?
So there's been a noticeable shift into skills-based hiring, which to every bootcamp grads is a boon because there used to be a really big gatekeeper, and it still is in certain industries. Certain things that might have a contract with the government, especially in certain states or the federal government, still have a hard requirement on that 4-year degree. So if you don't have a 4-year degree and you're applying with the federal government, you might get rejected because that's something that is in the law that they have to require. Similarly, if it's a consulting agency or some kind of thing that has a government contract that associates it with, it's another one that might bounce because of that hiring stipulation that they have in there. Otherwise, they might put that on there as a psychological barrier to prevent thousands of resumes coming in their door. I tell students, you know what? Go ahead and apply anyway and let the recruiter figure it out. A worst case scenario, you get a rejection. You're likely not going to hear anything at all. But if you do and have a great conversation, then it's to your benefit. But I think overall, folks, most hiring managers that I've talked to, people in the talent space have shifted away from the 4-year degree thing being a real hard stop, unless there's a certain thing that they need in there for it.
That's great. So for Jennifer, it's like shift away from some of those specific industries. Otherwise,
just those
apply.
two.
Even if
federal
it's a government
consultancy,
consulting,
they might, Jennifer, if it's a consultancy and they have some government contracts and they hard required degree, they meet you, they love you, they just won't put you on a government contract. They might find another reason, another project for you to work on because they want you to work there, right? Like you never know until you know. The federal, if it's like a government agency that hard requires a degree, maybe don't spend your time putting all your eggs in that basket. I would pivot your target to something else. But banks, insurance companies, retail, the manufacturing, all these different industries that are out there, the ones that Leah mentioned earlier, especially, most of them don't require a 4-year degree.
Yeah. And Liz, I just have one quick add on this because Flatiron School recently joined the Tear the Paper Ceiling campaign, which is all focused on skills-based hiring. Exactly. And we've also seen that you can use your non-degree as an asset. It is becoming like a sort of diversity characteristic that companies are looking for and actively seeking are non-degree holders. And so, whereas in the past, it used to be something that was an extra hurdle to jump is to sort of prove out your skills. If used strategically and the candidate can use resources like Tear the Paper Ceiling or others that can actually help highlight companies that are actively seeking non-degree holders, it now puts you in a narrow candidate pool, which is actually an asset in some cases.
That's a great point. And we'll put a link to Tear the Paper Ceiling, that campaign, because they do call out companies that are actively working on that. So that's a great point.
Yeah, very cool. Elisa asked, how do job seekers determine if a company is advertising fake or ghost job postings? I've certainly heard of this. Molly, are you seeing this as a widespread problem, or is this kind of just like here and there, just kind of clickbaity?
Yeah, we've been tracking scam offers for a while. Every time we come across one, we log it, we report it. Actually, we're trying to sort of do our part to combat this. Unfortunately, they're not rare. I think just like we've talked about in a lot of cases, it's important to do your research. If you get a random invitation for an interview completely out of the blue, that's a flag, right? Any sort of red flags you might normally get around your inbox, it's important to think about that in the context of your job search. I think the one word of caution I would share is that you should never pay money to a company in any part of the interview process. We've seen a common one where a candidate is asked to basically pay for the cost of their laptop and it will be reimbursed after a training period. So they'll sort of like buy their equipment up front. That's never appropriate. And so I think if you have any red flags at all, make sure, you're Googling the person that you're supposed to be interviewing with and you understand the company and you've done your research. But I think, these are going to continue, unfortunately. It's really, upsetting to see some of the scams that have come across, certainly my desk, but do your research. Do not share personal information or send money for any company equipment. Once you get to an offer stage, that's the appropriate time to really dig in and understand the benefits or the onboarding requirements in more depth with a legitimate HR representative from the company. So look out for yourselves.
Got to. Ashley, Ian asked a question that we literally get every time we do a live Q&A, no matter what it's about. Ian asked, do hiring managers still look at candidates who are 50 years old and up over the young guys, even if we've reinvented ourselves with a boot camp? Zoe asked a similar question. Can career changers over 40 find a job in tech post boot camp graduation? Tell us the truth about this.
Yeah, I think that you get this question almost every time because it's an important question. I'm a firm believer that ageism can be a real bias in the job market. I think it's important though that we focus on what we can control versus what we can't, right? And that's for any place that we might see bias in this market. The reality is that a recruiter's task is to identify the best candidates for the job requisition that they have, right? So really it is making sure you're leveraging those years of experience to your advantage. I mentioned earlier about the importance of focusing on what might have been your previous industry or your specific area of expertise that you come from and start there. When you think about if you are looking for a new job in the tech space, there's also this idea behind, am I doing a complete career pivot in that I'm not only learning new skills, but I'm trying to switch industries, right? That's one of the hardest, job searches. But if you take that down to somebody who's maybe in their 40s to 50s, feeling in this age range where they're like, oh, these young guys are beating me out. If you're okay with sticking in the same industry that you were in, really leveraging that and sticking to that area. I think the other piece that you've heard a ton already here is about networking, right? You're probably tired of hearing about networking. This isn't the first time you've heard it coming to this panel either. We know that. But that's what works best for you in these situations as well. Who is in your circle that vouches for you? What brand have you built for yourself all these years in your career before you decided to make this change? And who is willing to recommend you to their colleagues or their friends when they hear a need for your level of expertise? You're absolutely still employable. You just really have to refine your strategy to get to your goal. And it's really going to take kind of a holistic viewpoint of putting in all of these pieces of these recommendations that we put out there. But I would say leaning on your industry experience, your area of expertise, and leveraging your network are going to be your strongest suits in making this new job a reality for you, regardless of your age.
Love that. Thank you so much for those insights there. And speaking of networking, Daniel asked, are there any communities beyond the boot camps that I can join to get support from others? Lee, at GA, at General Assembly, are there certain communities or organizations that your team suggests to students or that students are finding themselves?
I think both. I think, one of the really great parts about our community is that back and forth of like what's working and hearing from alumni, right, who are out, working where they've created their own communities and want to recruit additional students to join them and things like that. Whether it's networking, so things like, and I'm not sure where this particular, person is in their journey or what program they're interested in. So I'll start generally, which is with ADP List, which, for any point in your search is a really great place to get mentorship. And I'll say, good for folks who prefer the one-on-one, connection with another. You can select based on, the area that you're interested in. You can select based on based on your time zone, availability, all those different types of things. But you have the ability to make a very specific question or ask of the person, and they are there to mentor you. So if you find yourself a bit shy, but wanting to get support or wanting to get some guidance, advice, or just some general, perspective, it's great for any part of your job search. Jay's partner with ADP List, so you'll notice there might be like, you'll kind of hear me start there just because they've been such a great resource for so many of our graduates over the years. I'll start specific based on program. One of my favorite for software engineering is Code and Coffee, which again has more of like a presence now in person across various metros. They've, during the pandemic went remote and now have kind of come back, to host more things in person. You can find a lot of those events in your local metro, or again, find something online. I do love Code Mentor. I think that's another one that a lot of graduates have said they've had a lot of success with as well. If you're UX Coffee Hours, Hexagon is a really good chapter-based one. A lot of folks in our UX program go straight to ADP List, whether that's for portfolio reviews, whether that's for mentorship, looking over design resumes, ATS resumes, or if you're like, all these various versions of resumes, what does this mean? It's so great to be able to kind of pair your career support, with your mentor support, to be able to make sure that you're hitting both of those if you're in UX. But that's another one that's really great. And for the data side, there's Data Talks Club. There's a lot of really good like niche data ones. So whether you're data science or you're data analytics, either program, you're going to find really great conversations happening, whether it's machine learning or if you're heading into, if you're a marketing professional turned data analyst, there's a community for you. There's lots of good niche, affinity groups as well, Techaria. There's lots of Slack communities that are out there as well. And again, like a quick Google search reveals a ton of different ones related to Slack. Those ones tend to change the most often. So I'll refrain from sharing too many of those, but based on your interest, based on the program that you're looking for, and if it's software specifically, I have seen Discord as probably the most trendy platform right now for folks to go to and kind of hang out in their cohorts and continue to get support after the program is over.
Does anyone else have any to add to that list? I feel like that's such a beautiful list. We're definitely going to share it. Any other communities that people
I'll just
out
add
there?
I'll just add one more, Lee, on the Discord space. So Flatiron has partnered with the Bletchley Institute to launch a Discord community that has a lot of bootcamp graduates and alumni in there. And so when you're in a job search or when you're trying to build your professional credibility, one of the things we really like about it is that we run weekly contests. So it gives you some structure to build something to then kind of continue to build on your credibility over time. So that's another great one to check out.
We've got a tip here as well. If there's a really fantastic app called Meetup that you can download to your phone and make an account and just search, whatever area that you're looking for, whether it's coding or UX, UI, or junior developer or testing or whatever you're interested in. Run a search, like just see what's in your area that's drivable or walkable even. I know there's a ton of mine that are walkable here in Columbus, Ohio, but I'm sure if you're in a bigger city, that's great. But if you're in a more rural area, there might be more than you think there is. that you can go and have coffee with you. I'm sure there's another software developer or someone else in tech that lives in your community and would love to find you. So you can go on Meetup, find meetup groups in your area, and they're usually they're usually free to go to, or they might be $5, but you go on there. Another resource you can look for too, if you know a specific meetup group's name, is Eventbrite, and see if they have any events listed in your area that are nearby. Usually when you go to like one of these like super techie spots that have all these people in them, they're usually really friendly to juniors, and they want you to be there, and they'll ask you to come introduce yourself. Here's my like second bit on meetup groups and whatnot. If there's a tech conference in your area, you can reach out to the organizers and volunteer to go work at the desk booth.
Great.
And suddenly you are meeting 1,000 people in one day who are smiling and shaking your hand and saying, "Hey, well, look at that. Look at that. Look at that gal. She's out here trying to meet everybody here in tech in the middle of the center of attention doing the sign-in sheet." Like, that's great. So you'll never know who you might meet, but you got to get yourself out there to do it.
That's a great point about volunteering. I feel like I personally have never loved like a straight up networking event, but I love a volunteer, and I love a something where you're learning something, a panel, a talk that someone's giving. You like have something to talk about specifically after with other folks in the room. So all incredible resources. Really appreciate that. And Vinny, if I can keep you here for one more second. So let's say you get your foot in the door, which we've talked a lot about, we'll talk more about, and then you're going to start the interview process. What trends are you seeing in interviewing right now? Like, should an applicant still expect to do 2 culture fit interviews, a coding challenge, get the offer?
Yes.
Next?
So
Okay.
there's a caveat here of a trend that's popping up, and I think all my peers over here have seen it, is that AI is being used on both sides. And folks want to make sure that you're who you are, who you say you are. What's on paper matches who you are in person. So when you're going into an interview, there will almost always be some sort of video or phone screen or culture interview or HR interview or whatever. There's a million names for this, but you'll be talking to a recruiter or a real person on the other side. This is much for you to understand that this is a real opportunity as it is for them to understand that you are a real person. These usually take place they used to be like back when I was in hiring between 2017 2020, these were almost always a phone call. Now these are more and more done via Zoom. These are almost always a remote interview. This can, if it's like a local job, you might meet them for coffee to make sure that you're a real person, that you match what's on your resume. There will almost always be some sort of code challenge or code whiteboarding. Whiteboarding is making a comeback in a huge way in the trends that I'm seeing, because you have to do it live. I can't give you ChatGPT code on a whiteboarding exercise. You have to do it in front of somebody else. Or they might send you a code challenge, and then you're going to have some sort of, you will almost always have a tech interview either way. Sometimes whiteboarding is the tech interview. But if you have a code challenge, they might bring you on that tech interview, and the first half of it is reviewing your code challenge and walking you through why you made the moves you made. Before, this is to make sure that you were the one doing it and that you understood the code you wrote. But now it's that plus making sure ChatGPT or another generative AI didn't write the code, that you know what it is. Sometimes there's some sort of like, I'm also seeing a trend uptick. I don't know if my peers are as well, but I'm seeing the panel interview come back in a big way too, where you're getting there and it's not just one person that's interviewing you, but it could be 3 or 4 different stakeholders at the same time. I think this is largely becoming popular again because of the volume of applicants, and it saves a lot of time for the company to do these more efficiently. There's a new step in here. So those are all pretty traditional steps that grow and wean in popularity as time goes on. Those are the 4 most common steps I see right now. But there's a new first step that's making headwaves everywhere, and that is the recorded interview, where you have 3 or 5 different interviewing, like, tell me about yourself, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, but it's recorded, and an AI watches the video and then submits the top 10 generative results to the recruiter. So the recruiter doesn't have to go through 1,000 resumes to pick one. It just hands them 10 based on how well you do that. So those are the common trends I'm seeing in interviewing right now before you get to the offer stage.
Wow. Yeah. Still, the interview process, I think the takeaway is there will still be many pieces to it. That is for sure.
More complicated somehow.
Yeah, it continues to be a bit of a rigorous process. So we've talked about how AI and the headlines may be impacting the job market, but we'd love to talk a little bit about the AI tools that could be helping or maybe even hurting your own tech job search. So Lee, what AI tools are we liking these days, and which ones would you recommend staying away from? What's working, what's not?
Yeah, I think majority of folks have been using, well, in terms of platforms, I think ChatGPT just continues to be the most popular. Whether or not they are using additional tools like Claude to do more like analyzing text, which again is not necessarily what an average job seeker is doing, but for research, for every, from what company or what industry should I be going to, they're using prompts to help initiate what are the top industries that match what I've done before for a research perspective. If you're sure that you want to go into data analytics, and let's say you have a couple years of experience doing various things, client work, you could use ChatGPT as that research vessel, to be able to pull out, what are the different job titles you might be looking for. One trend, of course, that we are seeing is job titles are not one and the same across, various companies and industries. So what might be a data analyst here might be, a marketing specialist, -1 at a different company. It just, the job titles can be so out there. So it's really important for you to get the full breadth of what that looks like. And I hear that a lot, especially when it comes to levels. So always read the job description very carefully. But from a research tool, how to set up your research, where you want to go, what you want to look for, what companies you're targeting, those competitors to really build out like a robust strategy. When you're positioning yourself, your brand is a really, really big deal. I spend a lot of time working with folks specifically on like, how do they position, how do they pitch themselves, or just how do they introduce themselves? How do they want to highlight their strengths? How do they want to tell their story, right? Whatever resonates with that person in an authentic way, whether that's in person, whether it's on paper, whether it's, in a various capacity. Using AI as a tool to really help craft that message and be able to optimize your LinkedIn profile using AI as well. There's lots of really great quick prompts like, hey, ChatGPT, help me, write out an about me on my LinkedIn profile. Here's a little bit about me. One caveat, I just want to make sure everyone is fully aware of this who's on this call. Please never insert any personal identifiable information into ChatGPT. This is a tool that is used as research. So keeping things general with, hey, if you send generic text or you send something that's about you but doesn't include your name, your number, anything that's important, please never put that information into it because you do not know where that information is going. So please protect your privacy. But when you are on LinkedIn profile, you can insert things related to your resume and say, can you please help me, write out some of these bullets, as long as you are not, again, putting in very specific information that's about you, right? You can say, here's what I'm doing. Here's now the role title I'm looking for at this type of company. How would you rewrite these bullets to best match this role, right? You can use ChatGPT for such a wide variety of different tools to be able to, update and create that baseline resume. Now, when you are I would say going from there into like networking strategy, or you're starting to build out your story, your brand, or trying to get different ideas, it's a really helpful research tool and a great automation tool and extension onto a lot of websites as well. Whether you're scraping for someone's email because you're just tired of never getting a response on LinkedIn, or if you're going in and need help actually writing that initial message and you're not really sure what to say, it's a really great tool to kind of help break the ice and help you create something to start with. Now, that being said, it's helpful with getting you started, but you still have to put your own personal touch on everything that comes back on ChatGPT. So, whatever platform you decide to use, and again, ChatGPT is just the one that, we present on the most and, is the conversation that strivers have the most with us. You still have to put your own words into it. It's going to give you a pretty generic response, and give you, whether it's like, here's how to introduce yourself, or here's how to write this note. You still need to add your own personal touch onto that. So please, please, please make sure whenever you are using these types of tools that you are overlaying your own voice onto it, read it back, read it out loud, read it to your dog, read it to your cat, whatever, or read it to a loved one, read it out loud and just make sure it sounds like something you would actually want to say. If you've ever wondered, well,
Sure.
how do I tell my story when I'm interviewing? I have no idea how to answer. Tell me about yourself. ChatGPT is a really great place to start and help with some of that as well. Of course, it's a really great starting tool, but it's not the last tool. You still need to do the work on top of what comes out of that. Again, if you think of AI as your tool of it's the intern, you're going to have a much easier time working with that tool.
And of course,
So
we're not going to use ChatGPT to, right? Yeah. Of course, we're not going to use ChatGPT to like do a coding challenge because, as Vinny pointed out, companies are filtering for that. Nobody wants you to do your coding challenge in an interview with ChatGPT. Okay, so I know we've only got time for a couple more questions. I definitely want to get to this one. Ashley, what is your advice for staying motivated during a job search? We want to stay excited, momentum, keep that momentum, stay energetic. But as we can hear, like you may be sending your resume out to 100, 500, 1,000 companies. How do you stay sane?
It's a great question. And I think it starts with how do you prevent yourself from getting demotivated and in a space where it's hard to do those things. So my number one thing is the importance of taking care of yourself. The job search process is grueling, and there's a lot that you have to do all of the time. And what I find is a lot of job seekers just get overwhelmed really quickly. You're telling me I got to source jobs. You're telling me I got to network. You're telling me I got to work on I got to build a portfolio. I got to keep my skills sharp. And now you're telling me I also got to take care of myself. This is just a lot. And add on whatever's happening in your personal life, whether you have a family, things like that. So I always try to apply what I'm calling like the bucket method. It's not official, not trademarked. And so what that means is you are having different buckets of your job search. You have job applications, networking, project and skill development, and then your self-care, right? But under each one of those buckets, there is something that falls under them. For job applications, we're just going to run with that one for a minute. You got to source your jobs. You got to make resume edits. You probably have to submit cover letters to those companies who don't want to let them go. You have to submit the actual application for those companies that still make you put everything one-on-one in the application. You got follow-up emails, things like that. Okay. So pouring something into each bucket per day means one of those things. What day of the week are you sourcing the jobs you're going to apply to that week? What day of the week are you going to work on your resume edits for the jobs that you found for that week, right? And doing that, you're doing that with each bucket because just pouring into each one per day, one of those things is progress. And it helps you lessen the feeling of overwhelm. And being overwhelmed is what decreases your motivation. So that's one tip that I like to give a lot of job seekers. And the last thing that I'm going to do here is I really want to advocate for the importance of therapy during the job search. There are just some types of support that need an unbiased individual to help you work through. And when our mindset and motivation is constantly challenged, it can be a really slippery slope of ending up into some really constant negativity. And I think what can happen a lot in the job search, and what I see with a lot of job seekers, even at Springboard, is this black and white thinking, right? You said I should do X, and then Y should happen. But when it doesn't happen right away, right, it really challenges us in our motivation and our mindset. And so the support of a trained professional who can give you the tools to get ahead of that sort of mindset and stop yourself in those moments is going to be really key to your success. And no career coach, none of us who work in these spaces are those trained professionals to help you work through that. And so that's some of the personal work that I advocate for, and I don't take that recommendation lightly. It's important to me. It's a value of mine. It's a personal journey that I've been on, for 2.5 years myself. And so I think it's worth considering for folks when they're thinking about their motivation and mindset, having somebody there to support them.
That's excellent advice. And I mean, just in talking to tons of alumni over the last 10 years, really, I think Jess and I just hear over and over again how much the career coach really helps in the process. So you're totally right. A career coach can't do everything, but can certainly help with the organization and keeping you accountable and setting that roadmap with you. running, being able to run those job postings or job listings or requirements by someone real that's there in your corner. So really appreciate all of you and the work that you do. Okay, I know we're right at 2:00. If you have 2 extra minutes, I just want to end on this final question, which is to look towards 2025. Alejandro asked in the RSVP, what are your real job expectations after Coding Bootcamp 2025? So what is everyone expecting for next year? We're almost there. Will the job market change? Will networking change? Will interviewing change? What do we think? Does it all depend on the election?
I'll go very quickly. We're just beginning to hear from our hiring partners on headcount expectations for 2025. So I do think it's still early, but I do think that leaning into AI fluency, I use the word fluency because it's just like day-to-day usage. Like you should be using these tools every day. That will give you a leg up in the 2025 hiring market. And on top of that, right, if AI has all of this potential, someone has to build it. And so there are jobs, there will be jobs. It means that, I don't expect that we'll see the candidate market change all that much between now and early 2025, but I do think that a lot of the actionable tips we talked about today are going to be even more important going into the early next year.
I think no matter how things turn out in the next 4 months, I think we have some positive changes coming our way. I think companies are starting to freak out a little bit less about the different market conditions that are going on right now. And I am seeing companies, much like Molly said, start to finalize their headcount from next year, and it's looking a lot more promising than next year. That being said, that doesn't necessarily mean that the job market's going to be any easier than it is now. You might not feel that macro perspective on your micro level, and that's okay. Just focus on the things that you can control in your job search rather than the things that you can't. You can't change how many companies are hiring at any given time, but you can change how many applications you put out there in the universe. You can't change if a recruiter is going to call you back, but you can change how many emails and introductions and networking that you do. So focus on your locus of control rather than getting overwhelmed with all the stuff that's out there. And it's much easier to stay excited.
That is fantastic advice, and I think a perfect place to wrap up. So I know we went 3 minutes over, but it's because we had so many good questions from everyone that RSVP'd, and we really appreciate that as always. Thanks for everyone for tuning in, and to all of our panelists. I think it's just very clear that you would be very incredible assets to your students at General Assembly, Springboard, Flatiron, and Tech Elevator. So we cannot thank you enough for being here and answering all these questions about the tech job search. We are going to post this video on the Course Report blog, as we always do, and we'll send it to y'all in a follow-up email today or tomorrow in the next day or so, because Jess and I are going to put together a nice little takeaway with all of these good actionable tips. And we'll include links to all of the great communities that people shared, and we really appreciate it. So thank you so much for everyone's questions. We're going to do more of these live Q&As in the future. So let us know in the comments, or you can email us at hello@coursereport.com. Let us know if there's a specific topic that you want us to dive into. We'll see y'all soon.
Thanks, everyone.